President Trump has been remarkable in how stable his approval ratings have been. Somewhere between 40 and 45%, maybe even a little bit above 45% of Americans have approved of President Trump's job performance through essentially the entirety of his administration. And remember, this is a man who has presided over probably the most eventful 4 years, and certainly a recent American history. Not too long ago, we were talking about his impeachment and how sort of momentous that was. And then since then, we've had the greatest pandemic in over 100 years, the greatest economic downturn in 100 years. Or in 80 years, and the greatest civil unrest in 50 or 60 years, all in the span of a couple of months. And yet his approval rating remained actually remarkably stable. But in the last few weeks, we have seen his numbers taking a small decline, losing several points, 2, 3, 4 points. In the most recent Hill-Harris-X poll, we see him at 47% approval, down from about 50 a month ago. That 3-point decline is reflected in a lot of other polling out there. You can see in the aggregators like 538, also about a 3-point slide. Our own Reuters Ipsos poll, about a 3-point slide. So it's real that he is losing ground. We're seeing it reflected in a lot of different polling. And I think it's remarkable that that did not happen during the worst of the pandemic in April. It did not happen in the worst of the job loss due to the pandemic in April and May. It's happening now that we're seeing this nationwide civil unrest after the killing of George Floyd. I think that says something about the things that are affecting the president's supporters or the president's base. And I think one other thing to note is the last time we saw President Trump's approval numbers dip was after the Charlottesville riots in 2017. We also saw his numbers decline. They bounced back up, but the question I think now is, will this decline we're seeing be maintained through the election, or as we sort of get it further away from the protests, if they do, tail off, will we see President Trump's numbers sort of bounce back up to their natural resting place in the low to mid 40s? We have a lot of survey data that speaks to sort of what the public sees as President Trump's strengths and what they think he's less strong on. And the economy and jobs has been, for pretty much his entire administration, something that the public's generally seen him more positively on. If you look at his job approval ratings on just that part of the job, they have typically been a net positive. That is, more people approve than disapprove. Usually somewhere just above 50% approving of the economy. Now, that's, of course, while the economy was going really well for most of his administration. We were part of, in the longest sort of post-recession growth spurt of modern history. But it was interesting that even as the economy took this really sharp downturn after the pandemic started in April and all of the public health and public safety rules were put in place, his approval on handling of the economy remained pretty strong, remained pretty solid. Which I think suggests that people just in general see the president as someone who more or less has an understanding of the economy. Now, contrast that with social issues, and his numbers are much, much worse. He is a net negative and generally below his overall job approval ratings on a whole host of different social issues, including things like the environment or climate change, including things like abortion or choice, including things like race relations, and then there's some other issues, particularly ones that he's used a lot as sort of his signature issues, like immigration, where his numbers tend to be pretty close to his overall approval rating, where immigration has fundamentally become another version of talking about Trump. Talking about immigration is just another way of talking about Trump. And we've actually seen his handling of the coronavirus pandemic mirroring that as well, where it has become essentially just another proxy for his overall approval, as opposed to things like jobs, where maybe you don't like the president, but like he's doing an okay job because the economy's good, or the social issues where, maybe you like the president, but you admit that like these aren't really his strongest issues. And what we're seeing right now is the focus is on racial issues and issues of civil justice. And that's not a space that the president is generally seen strong in. So some Republicans who are a little bit different from him on the issue are pulling away slightly, and we've seen his approval rating among Republicans decline a little bit over the last couple of weeks as these protests have come out, as well as seeing his numbers among independents and even Democrats go down slightly. But I think the thing that the White House has got to be most concerned about is losing these Republicans, because he really does need his base behind him to win re-election. The president is trying to make the best of the hand he's dealt by focusing on the economy. And I think that could potentially work for him for two reasons. One, even though things have gotten really bad and we've had record unemployment rates, it does look like the economy is recovering. I don't think it will recover as quickly as a lot of people hope and expect it to, but it will recover. And being on an upward trajectory is generally a good thing for an incumbent. Even if you're at a relatively bad place, the direction of change matters a lot. So if things were getting worse and the election was happening, that would be really bad news. But if things getting better, even from a bad place, that's okay. The other thing I think that is important to note is Americans right now have a really strong, really high expectation that things will get better quickly. In our consumer confidence tracking, our Ipsos consumer confidence tracking, we actually see more people saying that the economy will be stronger in 6 months now than we've ever seen in our tracker. And that's partially a characteristic of the way the question is worded, where we're asking people to think compared to now what 6 months is like, but also this sort of sense of optimism, the sense that things are going to rebound quickly, that we're going to be able to get back to normal quickly. I think that, if that holds, that actually helps the president make his case that the economy is getting better. I think the challenge, though, is if we do see another wave of coronavirus, as some signs say it might be starting, if we have to see more lockdowns go into place to protect public health, or if we see the economy not actually recover that quickly, those expectations could be dashed, and then we actually might be looking at the president start to lose some ground on that issue of the economy.